Rick Osborne now speaks to youth about the choices he made in his life. In fact, Rick says this, like everyone else in this world, I made choices through my free will, and I also suffered the consequences of those choices. Personally, he says, I needed to return to the God of my youth before I could beat my addiction. It was a bitter, cold, early winter morning in 1993 that found Rick in the hospital after attempting to take his life. Today, I'm joined live in studio with Rick Osborne. Rick, great to have you with us today. Thank you so much for being here. What a life.
Yeah.
What a story. You know, Rick, as I've read through your story and just gotten to know you, I know you've been on Huntley before. It's great to have you back with us. Talk a little bit to our audience today about how this all started in your life and where did the downward spiral into this life been on destruction? Where did it all begin?
Well, you know, and a lot of times people go, oh, you have this incredible life of addiction. How did it start? With me, it's just one mistake. And you wouldn't believe how many guys I meet and girls that it was just one mistake. I went for a ride with an older guy who I thought was cool. And I was 14 years old, starting high school in Niagara Falls, Ontario, and knew nothing about drugs. And I went for a ride thinking I'm a cool guy with an older individual, 21 years old. I was 14, and meanwhile he was a heroin addict, and he liked to watch virgins get high.
Yeah.
And that was it for me. And once you start getting in that loop of taking drugs, escaping the shame that happens and everything, it didn't take long before I was an opportunistic criminal at street level doing drugs.
Yeah, and you know, I know your work now in this and your message, and I understand it even on a personal level because of my background and my past. And I always say that who you surround yourself with in life is who you end up becoming.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about those associations and where that eventually led you.
Well, what happened with me is I ended up being on the street as a heroin addict at 14, 15 years old, opportunistic criminal, and then started traveling. If I could get down to Florida, I could be a drug addict down there and wake up sandy on the beach if I screw up, not frozen, and got raped and stabbed down in Florida, which happens when you're a young man on the street. It's not only young women that are vulnerable. And when I came back up to Canada, I now feared men and started cutting, which is an affective disorder. By the way, the tattoos are cutting too.
Yeah.
I'm entirely tattooed.
And you have a few of them, or just one.
Yeah, it depends how you look at it, right?
Yeah.
But what that was too was my cutting. But what happened, I became fatalistic, I guess, and I started robbing guys and everything. And of course, I started becoming on the radar of guys retaliating, and then became in with the bikers.
Yeah.
And so it was actually a guy who became an incredible Christian man, Garnet McEwen, who, Mother, we called him, who put me in a headlock and took me in the alleyway. And I thought I was going in the Welland Canal, but I was actually going to his house, and he took me in and kind of saved me from myself on the street anyway.
Rick, you mentioned the God of your youth. Where was God in the midst of all this? And talk about that background a little bit.
Well, you know what? I work with angry young men with no fathers. It's not a very politically correct description, but fathers are out of the picture. When I grew up with a father and everything, but I grew up in a Christian home, but having no understanding of the relationship.
It is a relationship.
Yeah, and so just in a Christian home, just let me feel that though. So I knew I was missing something, I just didn't know how to get there.
Yeah.
I left home too early. At 14, I didn't quite understand born again.
Yeah.
I couldn't internalize that. So I hadn't made that decision. Although when I was 9 years old, I did ask God into my life, and I found this out later that I had when I was 9.
And so you kind of have that in the back of your mind all through this journey that was full of all kinds of personal pain.
Yeah.
Talk about where you eventually ended up in this lifestyle.
Well, you know what? By 19, I was one of Canada's most dangerous men. I had a Canada-wide warrant, which is the most dangerous status. At 21, I went to the penitentiary, and I did 25 years.
Wow.
So, but during that time, in 1993, about 15 years into the sentence, I got released on a statutory release and came to Niagara Falls area. And you said the thing ended up in a hospital bed trying to take my own life, and then went back to prison. So I had somebody try to take my life, and then I was in the hospital because of that shooting, and then decided to take my own life. I couldn't live with myself anymore.
Yeah.
By that age, 39, 40 years of age, and went back to prison. And then in prison, when I was ready to give it all up, I asked God to come into my life. And it was in a cell in Millhaven where really my prayer to God was, let me die like a man let me die like a man in the yard and go to heaven on grace, the guy on the cross next to you.
Wow.
So that's what I was asking Jesus for. Give me the grace that you gave the guy on the cross, because there's no way I'll survive this.
Yeah.
It wasn't survivable.
And of course, Jesus looks at the man on the cross next to him, who moments before insults were being hurled at him.
Yeah.
And he says, today you'll be with me in paradise. And so you kind of had one of those
You know,
last minute confessions.
I wrote it on my shirt.
Yeah.
Like I was writing Bible verses on my shirt and everything, because I really thought I would go to yard and be killed by rival gang members. And my hope was go to heaven.
Yeah.
And actually have a life up there with my family, who I couldn't have down here because of my addiction and everything, which is strange, that whole situation, right?
But this desperate prayer didn't end in your demise. In fact, something began to change.
Well, it's incredible what happened. The guy in that prison cell had a grade 8 education. I only did the first month in grade 9 in high school. Cutter, a junkie, a full-on gang member in a warring club. I had 15 years in, I had 10 more to go. What can God do with a guy like that? 3.5 years later, I became the 17th person in Canadian history to get a university degree.
Wow.
He brought a professor into my life, and all of a sudden, so all of a sudden I'm smart. I get to go to drug treatment. All of a sudden I'm not on drug treatment. I meet a teacher, and she ends up going and waiting for me, and we have a wife, and we have a little daughter, and so it's just an incredible. But I sometimes say it's like when I started this journey with God, it was like me walking a tightrope. I had to watch each foot as I put it, and my arms are out, and I'm watching. I'm not taking my eyes off the prize, you know.
Yeah.
And it just becomes easier and easier and easier. I still wake up though, going, not in jail.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing, right?
Wow. Well, we're glad. We're glad what God has done in your life. We're so glad, and we're thankful for stories like yours that give hope in the most hopeless of circumstances. And one of the keys is you just kept walking, one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
You know, we've got viewers today that are tuning in that are probably either dealing with something in their life personally and they don't know if they can continue, or maybe there are people in their lives that they know, loved ones, husbands, wives, sons, daughters, grandsons, granddaughters, friends, and neighbors that are dealing with addictions that seem insurmountable.
Yeah.
But Rick, you're here in studio today, and you are living proof that God is not dead, and He is able to take even the most hopeless prayers at times that we feel, and He's able to turn that into something amazing. And your story is the story of amazing grace.
Well, and it's incredible, because I never saw, like you say, I never saw any of it. There's no way you can survive this. There's no way I can't be an addict. There's no way I could have a wife. There's no way I could have a, and meanwhile, God just takes all those, like, you know, He qualifies the guy who comes and does it, right? So my thing has always been in faith. So going to the yard the first time, waiting to be killed by rival gang members, writing Ephesians 9 on my, do you know what I mean? I got the breastplate, you know, and just doing that faith walk, and it just gets easier and easier and easier. And also, you know, like I meet guys who I've done 20 years with, and the only one who can speak into their lives that knows what they've been through is me. Yeah. Right? And so you never know who you can, you know, you think, oh, my life, I'm over here, who's going to use me? God's got a plan for you that you can't see. Yeah.
You know, what do you do now? Talk about your work now, because it's incredible how God's using you.
Well, Truth for Teens is my charity. We've had it since '05. It really is my passion for working with youth. I go into schools and talk to them interactively, right? It's not entertainment. It's not a great big tattooed guy. It's not scared straight. It's here's what the real world is. Here's, you know, you ask questions. And then we feed about 100 people on Saturdays in St. Catharines, right across from the Booth Center, and that lets me have access to the people down there, so I can advocate with them. A lot of the people I work with, I didn't know love. I didn't know any of that. I lived in this misery that I had created, that I was responsible for. A lot of what I tried to do is show love. So we just try to advocate and show love and work with people. So we work with marginalized people. I don't know if that's the term now, right? But the ones God cared about, Jesus cared about, that's who we work with.
He truly did, and He still does. And you know, it's powerful to listen to this story because there are so many people out there that feel forgotten, forsaken, and alone, and you're helping be a part of the gospel, which the gospel at its core restores human dignity. That's what it's really all about, and that's what God did for you. Talk a little bit, though, because you're also doing some work in human trafficking, and you recently received some kind of award for this.
Yeah, Joy Smith Foundation gave me an award, a man of distinction. Meanwhile, I used to be
there we have an image of it.
Yeah, the worst guy, and here I am. So really, it's advocating at street level. Yeah. So the area where I became a heroin addict in Niagara Falls, we have a house there that we can have working girls, prostitutes come in and be safe, go to treatment, go to detox from there, or just advocate. We can advocate for them. Yeah. We also do a bail living program where we work with young men and bail them out. Wow. It's an incredible, just what does God do? When a young man comes out in handcuffs and he's homeless and he's ripped clothes on him, he doesn't even look to the audience because there's nobody there for him. Yeah. And a Christian guy stands up and goes, "I'll stand for him," right? Yeah. And so it gives you that in to work with them. So we're just trying to find a way to work with people in this Golden Horseshoe, the Niagara region, and advocate for them.
Rick Osborne, our guest today, incredible story of God's transformative power. He's proof that grace isn't fair, but it is free, and you can receive it too. If you have a need in your life today, I want to encourage you to call our prayer line. There are people standing by ready for you, to talk with you, to pray with you, and maybe it's not just you that needs prayer. Maybe you need prayer for someone that you love in your life, and you're feeling like this is for them, and this is a moment where you want to reach out to God on their behalf. Rick, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's great to have you back on Huntley. God bless you in your ministry, Truth for Teens, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon, hearing about all the great things that God is doing in your life and ministry.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.